Oh 가슴 음에 처신한도 개요 말이네. 근데 루브르도 아니 계지지 시작이 다 프로그램도 제로로 드리지 충분해. 드리 유당이 망부시라지 다 주주 시원의 시야체 주주 시원의 시에다 주디 거디 참 샤사데 나중에 중요한 말 드리 뉴스안에 다 거디 샤샤를 이거다 드리 뉴스안에 다 조시 에네 다리디 접지 청구를 붙이기 에네 남시 신제베 다 송주들의 나네 디 송주 예벌에 패배 로마 상마로 상마당 아니 지 최기 접어 나버서 상마로래야 야 도마르다 섬지다 드시딜레 슈야이
Actually, in our program, we had not arranged for this opportunity, but suddenly the chance to say a few words about the Dharma and have this program or schedule happened. So we've decided that that we'd start the talk at 4 o'clock, but when it will end, that we didn't decide that. So we'll stop whenever it is that we end. So primarily we have Kyabje Tongpa Rinpoche and also all of his students who have come to his teachings on the distinguishing consciousness from wisdom. Likewise, there are all of our Dharma friends who are gathered here. So I'd like to, first of all, offer you greetings and Tashi Dedek.
somebody tingsan 초진에 아니 뒤름 니슈즈지바 생리기 라제 야게 첨부여봐 아니 지금 뭐베 야게 첨부여베 다 뒤름질이야 문지시야래 초제 당 아주 야 지금 남바 상계베 양측 추중대주 나눠다 뒤님만 가도 왔어. 다 너나 지 심지어 담지에 에너지 녀모라고 하다. 안 다나시 다지 로버타와로 체망외 뒤주지량 문지시야래. 단 드레지기다 뒤주 다 너나 간다량 아주 좀 일지지만 디나로리아 미상으로 자와체로 송 자와체로 치 에조 치 응외베 다 시왕도 송네 낭심기 대기 최 고급 용도 중요하네. 다나시 친한기 다因为 이게 나서지 니마르 레신도 사부 퇴심바래 드린도 다 드리지게 뒤주 용도 사부 드리지 나로래야 이게란주 에네지 라마를 붙이 에네 개진 청구를 붙이도 군들이야 담배 쉬게 쉬하고 고급 중세지 렌토버디 그냥 성으로 개발 상보시라래 근데 인주산에 조조디 한 담배 쉬 라메 군들은 생샤와 되게 조다 되냐면서 낸 거보다 계속 있으래 다 되냐면서 낸 세주산에 다 냐면서 낸당 대양 지금 최체하게 뒤주려고 술도 믹스에 쇠네 냠술 렌당 지당 야 뒤단 뒤매봐 지금 뒤매봐라 뒤매봐라야 지금 남균대도 아니 지금 최기 다지 삼바당 최기 죄함대 속히네 냠술 렌당 니용대 요래 니가 개침부도 나 디나네 양 아주야去加个推举那个所以说第哪路来确实的要不着钱但第推举的人的呢人家让给敲完了你就别搞当大那些你就从家别搞当大那些没想到的这把所谓搞太大都等下就确实上不当觉得 탐지 제 손아야 지금도 들린데 야바도 다 티니니 농고녀 버지당 도나 이 랑기 미즈당 최이 냠내 티니 타대도 송 많이 봐 냠도 딜도 버지 그거데 계십시다 넣어서도
I think when we look at the situation today, from one perspective, we are in the 21st century, and this is a time when scientific knowledge is increasing greatly, and there's a great improvement in the external times. And so this is the sort of century we live in. From another perspective, though, this is a time that is described in all of the Buddhist scriptures as being a time of the 5 degenerations, a time when sentient beings have many coarse afflictions and negativities, and in particular when people have many wrong views. And so this is the time that we are in. This is the 21st century that we are in. And so I think it is important that in a time such as this, when there's the danger that we will be more and more, there's more and more danger of being distracted by external things. And we get more and more busy. And we have fewer opportunities to look for happiness within our own mind. And so because of various circumstances, external and external circumstances such like this, then every day when we lead our life in everyday situations, then we need to be able to look for the Dharma in those times. Now you all are people, you have been able to make the time to come here and listen to teaching with the precious Lama, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche, and you've taken up this opportunity to do this. And this is an extremely fortunate thing that you do. But the main thing when we listen to the Dharma in the presence of a great Lama such as this, the important thing is that we need to practice the Dharma. We need to practice its meaning. And when we say that we need to practice the meaning of Dharma, then there are 2 different ways that we can practice the Dharma. One way is that we can make a special time where that we set aside and we do our practice in that time. And another way that we can practice is without really paying regard to time, but to just always keep practicing the Dharma continually. And so we practice the Dharma. We always try to keep Dharmic thoughts in minds, and whatever behavior or actions we're doing, we try to mix that with our practice. Now, both of these are important. And especially when we set aside times to do our Dharma practice, that is important. But if afterwards, when we are doing our various affairs, it is also important that whatever we are doing, whether we are doing business or whether we are making connections with other people, if we forget the Dharma within our mind, then that is not okay. And so what is important is that our own lives that we lead and the Dharma are not separate, but it's important that we manage to bring them together.
다나지 가상 거니 미가식 알아야 좋아 지링도 다들이야 what is the best way to serve 가세 그래서 미 르부지리아 청구르부지리아 아니 지 가수에 셰비슈야 슈단 약슈디 슈루슈단 약슈디 가레스 이렇게 저렇게 되는 용도 더 가도 되는 게 이제 가 휴시에 와서 가 아랑 미세 데레사 그 민도 라바도 tin상아 좋아랭게 아디스 가리네지 수빈에 따르지면 좋아지 렌스들산에 아니 렌디 좋아 레라부지 유에비네 디 렌게아들이야지 통통으로 자리 근데 인도산 미세 좋아 렌게아스게 조마서 다디 조 지선다 지금 직전다 림보시 라나 컨디션에 아워야레스 내려지 샤 총송 삼스 다 간다야 이제 라메 공부 주야디 다 주루주다 망고야레 다 조데 라메 공부도 되베도 라메 가다 라메 공부도 되베도네 아니 라메 셰프 주야디 계속 있으래 마도야지 소수기 랑타랑 주를 제시 어다디 소수 강삼바티 소수 삼다 니야슈레도 삼바를 제시 이내야디 지 라메 공부도 못임바 임비나 다디 라메 가주번 조금마르바 다 조조지 라메 공부도 좀 제거하되 계속 있어 라메 공부를 좀 제거 다 대한 지 라메기 셰프 주스도 산다 베나 지주 베나 아주 지주 밀레 남발을 직대베이나 아니 지주 밀레디 다 지나도 유지 마르바디 참참공 지 남바 잡들이야 다지 로마드지 규지 균조바로 퓨나 아니 지최 나와라고 대마뷰나 많아와라고 다 진짜 수된 거 알아 다디야 수된 거 받으라 거 봐긴세 전부 알았어 다디 거 봐긴세서 그냥 나랑 그 섬수지다 거 봐긴세 나랑 그 통주기 거 봐긴세 그냥 또지 캔사버지도 나랑 섬수 베나다지 상아 왕당 당화 사모디소 깨바다 미디엄 발라 된 초요만 된 롱고요만 깨바다 덴베 가사 대달라야 내 건조만 좀先된 초요만 갑단 튠다 되네 양지 되네 슈아보티 다디 삼조르키 체롱마롱 델레야 공바시네 내지 완다 담아 떼고 알아봐 다 대대는 구두산에 다 결혼한 배는지 로마 개바다 대바지 라말레야 완 담아 텐자와시 나로지 인데자와시 나로지 슈인두산 라메나상 진 엉앙에 결혼할 때 담아데 되게 미스라네 라마 되어도 다 델레 결혼 거 되네 배데 배나다지 pena kabdi tu ser jindan chebo Hindustan ta ser be karso da di ser do chembo ji da kan da kiran ju kiran ke yo na tene nang yin sa ro ji da excuse ro ji da be di ser de choji ne nye bar ka wa de di nye bar ka wa di chö ne nye bar ka wa ser nye bar ka wa de chö ne 다 배바 도망 거네 째고 와래 근데 대제네 퓨나 근데 로마디 지금 닝 타바네 지 최대 제대로 봐 마도베 가즈 지 최단으로 많이 봐 지기 나나나 마나사로 많이 봐다 진짜지 지 최제지 연구도 올라야 초지네 다 이게 당기 쉬운하신 상아 사모데서 가족만 좋는 게 매우 인도사다 대나가래 앞서는 게 미스 송들 제보 매우 인도사네 안고란들이야 차겐도지 마송 인도사네 다 될된 디스 연구 펜더로 연구되게 맨더서 다 간다야 이제 에너지 밀러레발이야 에너지 고란 다 장보도지래 되네 인도사네 다 균조박라 소바 되게 비와게 피아요 말때 이비네야 어느 거랑이 체질이야 두번째네 다디 두배 샷도 아니 lama mapale pyugi yins adle sungre ten yusane jik lame shabdo dubala ngebardo jik lame jik kuti le dene shabdo dugwa dugwe be ngeba yang mebre dagana jik sangsingi jorba jachimbo pyune jik shabdo dugwa mebre ta dona jik lame gadang gombadan tümbajina ta niringdang ane ji junjoba yume la ma ba ta lame gada gomba chuchoba jin du sane ta zo di ji samjor ni bodil rale de yare ji sambada jowa pyusum choba ji dang samjor takda ji yebe ina tene ji lame gada gomba an jukto de sango de du sane zo de ji so su de sambada jowa 상부지 영화가 저지 거두이네 요구해야 다 개좀 시라 인사에서 정도
In the past few days, there have been several people who've come to ask me what the best way to serve Kenshin Trangu Rinpoche might be. And I haven't been able to answer them directly in it. And recently I felt like even when people ask me questions, they might be easy questions, but I feel like I haven't been able to really give good direct answers. I haven't known what to say. But the main thing, when we talk about finding ways to serve the Lama, I think, is that we can think about different ways to do it, but the main thing is that we need to find ways to serve the Lama that fit with the Lama's intentions and the Lama's purposes. And so it's important for us to do what the Lama's intentions are and what the Lama tells us to do. And so if we serve them in that way, that is the important way to serve them. Otherwise, if we just decide for our own selves and say, okay, this is the best way for me to serve the Lama, if that way that we decide is not it does not fit with the Lama's intentions, or does not, then we aren't accomplishing what the Lama wants us to do. We're not accomplishing their words. And so it is important for us to make sure that what we are doing is connected with the intentions of the Lama. And so when we serve the intentions of the Lama, sometimes when we think about it, like if we think, for example, about the life of Milarepa. So Milarepa was someone who, when he was with Marpa, sometimes it was as if with Marpa, when Milarepa didn't have anything to offer, it was like when Marpa was displeased, then he wouldn't give the Dharma. And yet, on the other hand, sometimes when he was pleased, it seemed like he gave the Dharma. But I think that there are reasons, and there were the reasons and purposes for why Marpa acted like this. This is just the way I think, but the way I see the purposes and the reasons, maybe it's a kind of strange way of thinking about it. But actually, with the secret mantra Vajrayana, when you're talking about giving the profound instructions and the profound profound instructions and the profound empowerments, these are things that should not be generally given. They should not be given to people who don't have the right capabilities or the right fortunes. And even if someone has the right capabilities and right fortunes, then you shouldn't just give them everything and anything at all times. Rather, you need to look at the situation, the time, and you need to look at what it is that the person who's requesting it is able to understand. And so these are the purposes. And so for that reason, you need to give the empowerments and the instructions that fit with the student. And so when you have the fortunate students, and if you give them any sorts of empowerment, if the student comes forward and says, "Oh, please give me this empowerment or give me these instructions," it can be difficult, or it isn't so easy to say, "I'm not going to give you those instructions right now." And so maybe for this reason, the Lama would then say, "Okay, you need to go find some gold." At that time, gold was very difficult. It was very hard to find. And so the Lama would say it was very valuable. The Lama would say, you need to go get a big piece of gold and bring it to me. And so maybe this was actually an excuse. Gold was difficult to find. And so if the student actually went through the effort of going and looking for the gold, finding the gold, and then offering it to the Lama, then you can tell that it was a student who was really trying to do the Dharma wholeheartedly, from the bottom of their heart. It's not as if they were just trying it out or dipping their toes in it in any way, to seeing whether they wanted to do or not to do. And so as a way of trying that out or I think that's one reason why they did that. And another aspect of it is, as I've said, the secret mantra Vajrayana is not just something that you can give immediately right away. You have to make sure that the person is ready for it. So, for example, and you need to give it in a way that they are able to receive it. Like with Milarepa, for example, he may have been a beggar. He may not have always had things to give, but what he offered was the practice to devote his entire life to practice. And so by practicing without regard for his flesh, he gave himself for that practice. And in this way, he was able to really serve his Lama. He was able to accomplish the words of the Lama. So in this way, when we think about serving the Lama does not mean that we necessarily need to stay all the time right next to the Lama. It's not necessary that we need to always be there. Instead, we need to think about the needs of think about the words of the Lama, and think about the intention of the Lama, and try to serve the Lama in this way. But the main thing is that we have to try to do this with, the Lama has to look and see what is the student's intentions and their activities like. And you need to have the really excellent intentions and excellent activities. And so if you're going to be able to serve the Lama, the first thing that you need to do is you need to make sure to prepare yourself so that you have the good intentions and the good activities.
Terenju sane ta lame dangwa ka du nang yong ma yong ten mi do wa de pera ji telo na ri nam ta ri ji che bi na pera dangbo na ro be sam ba la ji be dangwa cham bo ji nang yong gre sam ro ba ta pera ji kuran o ma pen de cham bo yin sa ta dangwa cham bo ji be ji pera body of the short term ambuji na yung gre sosar de chen ane telo be chung do lo mang bu de ina dangwa chik ji ya manang ane dama de ya ane chik telo be cham da ya chilo la nyam do pe ane be na ji telo ba la kawa mang ba che chu be lu yu ba ta kawa che ane da tene ju sa ne samsam kawa che kawache ba khorang kawache sa khorang rang ji dangwa chembro yin de bro samsam tene hindustane ta ji lame gi khashwe dangwa de ji ngaju sambar ji lame dangwa nan si sa be chöge na ba chembo ji tombo da ba ji yamana ji khashwe be ji 최이 배 흉천부 로샤부로 되지 그 삼몬더버지 나고요 그래 삼으로 나들이 정경하네 이미냐 아데 된데미도 와 되게 뉴산다 조조디 간다야 아니 수술해야지 라마티 템베 네고기 삼바 세단 되면 고래 삼바 세단 되면 좀씩 여배 고민해 봐 삼바디 여번은 신지 좋아라는 다에 내고라양 아니 친지 말로 가지고 고위에 인도산에 다 좋아 비좀 잡아지 고요하래. 다들 개점을 다 대마도 간도 다 뒤지고들이야. 다 가셔야지. 다 뒤져 가셔. 언제 가시. 된 당에 대신 다 뒤져라 가르치는 돈을 대바시에서다.
It's not always definite. It's not always definite when the Lama is going to give instructions or how they're going to give instructions. Like if we think of the stories of Telopa and Naropa. Naropa first thought to himself, oh, I'm going to get this really big, important instruction. He thought, I'm this great Mahapandita, this great scholar, and I'm going to get this great instruction. Maybe I'll get a whole volume, a whole text worth of instructions with a lot of pages worth. But when he went and actually met Telopa and spent time with Telopa, he spent many years with Telopa, and during that time, Telopa didn't even give him a single word of instructions. Sometimes they'd go out together, and at that time, then Telopa would subject Naropa to various different trials and tribulations. And maybe it actually ended up being that these trials were like instructions in and of themselves. So when we think about the Lama's instructions, we think, oh, the instructions, we think that it's going to be something in this high dharmic language, this very profound thing. We think that we're going to receive a teaching on some great text. It's going to be very profound and deep. And yet, it is not always like that. It's not definitely going to be like that. And the main thing in any case is that whenever the Lama does teach us something, then our own intentions and our own thoughts have to come up to the level of, it has to be at the level of our intentions and our thoughts. And when it's at that level of our intentions and thoughts, then we have to be able to really put it into practice truly, and to put it into practice without mistake. And so in this way, this manner of being able to actually put it into practice is very important.
다들 이게 가상지 송주지 지어냈어. 근데 송주 제가 임생 가라했어. 중세대 때는 저 시아민도다 가보요아레스 가보요아레스 되니 주사는 순주샤오레스 근데 순주에 가르샤오레스다 낭도로 가르샤오레스라비 다 대지 제나 rumbuche da ji namshi isin je ba sungyo are de dan de ba yawa yana ji lama da lome parje jin debe ko la ji shena ya budus de mai na chorang ge da kar chamba ji shena ya budus da de de ji so de ni du sa ne ta 남시 이신제부터 무책임에 니마 먹고 송사도 산다 될 양해 지금 먹고시 이 쉬신게 민도라 안데 지 전에 예 진담의 쉬 양대 무책임에 니마 먹고 송사도 초라치네 괜찮다 거야 남도 어떤데 제중 그냥 니마 먹고 야부 중송데 안 콜레 내내 자네 야부 중마 송사로 다 되진 거로 봐 다 드네 라마다 로메 콜라네 다다가 공도슈바티네 시레나 마시네 가라나 지 라마다 로마 가라 라마 야보지미 로마 야보지미 인트레 인두스타네 라마다 로메 제바디 지 베셔여바 자마도 소수규레 메두스타네 칼라가보 지 티시알레 영화 잡으러 아데지 양지 한바지네 셰베이네야 대지 야보지 셰두사 말에 드네 인두스타네 다대야 뭐지 다 임비네 가산들이 예지 rumbuche 가산데 남시 신제바 송전하는 고주번에 직전에 예지 다 남시 신제바 코라데 양대단 잡아예베 베나지 티보 첨부 지 선잠베기 대주 가시에 다나시지 정중 우마베 대주 가시에 다나시 다 까마바 군진 수바런 조도진 다음 아니 미주도 제셔 가시 테스트 대비 배차 가시 도스 때니 다 디나는 가시 지 가수에 지 가수에 통대바디서 같이 가시 지기나토로 마 슈비나 아바지 지 녜지 삼로 잠이라 땅이 슈모거체 아디 대제나는 예버디서 마 가시 겨르샤한테 바진 지금면로서 녜 디스ön 로면로서 데데 지 태소 데데 주산 계시 논주 충분이나 주 다단에 주 서바시로나 마도야 동기 딱그 배들이 잡친들이 시에서 야부기대 야부시에마서 배에 섬사로데 두 개씩이나 야부민도 다단에 공범마서 쉬아이
So the other day I was asked to give this teaching, and so I asked, well, what's the reason for giving the teaching? And they couldn't really definitely say. It's just like everyone would be happy about it. And so then, what should the teaching be about? Well, then they said, well, if Rinpoche is teaching about the differentiating consciousness from wisdom, so maybe if it's in connection with that somehow, or maybe if you say something about the connection between students and teachers, that would be good. Or if you don't want to teach about that, whatever you think would be fine. So Rinpoche has been teaching the distinguishing consciousness from wisdom for many days, and so there's not a whole lot that I have to say about that. And even if I did, Rinpoche has been saying so much about that. If I were to say something, then you might get this sort of doubt or this sort of start thinking to yourself, oh, Rinpoche didn't say that. That's different from what he said. And then you have this wrong idea. So that wouldn't be good. And then in terms of the connection between student and teacher, I've just said a few things about this. And actually, whether or not I'm a good lama or whether or not I'm a good student, if I just sort of say a few words out of textbooks or something, the main thing is that really it has to be something that you feel within your own being. And if it's not, then it's kind of embarrassing to talk about it. Or if I tried to be boastful or pretend that I could speak about it, then that wouldn't be good either. But Rinpoche has been teaching from distinguishing consciousness and wisdom, and so over the past few days I've been looking at a few things that are related to that, a few things from the Mahayana scriptures. I've looked at some mind-only treatises and some middle-way treatises, as well as the writings of the third Karmapa Rangchun Dorje, as well as of Mikyu Dorje. And in looking at these few things, there are a few words that I think I can just relate to you, and so I think if I just, repeat these words that they say, then that will probably be enough, and that will probably suffice for this. But beforehand, before I say anything, I'd like first of all to beg your pardon and beg your forgiveness for any mistakes that I might make, because I might make some mistakes. And if you all then leave here thinking, "Oh, he said that, and that's not right, and that's not right," then that wouldn't be good at all. So in the beginning, I would like to beg your patience with in this regard.
다 데려야 어주디 단 즈이 원바 즈이나 아주 로빈 인행이 제베 아니 원바 즈이 자외 나로리아 아니 심다 이다 남시 숨 남시니 튼직 사지 송여베 인두산에 심다 이다 남시 숨 튼직 송여베 인두산에 아니 다 셔라나 온도디 버디즈지 스위 남시 송 지당찬다 튼지도 지 송규 심다 이다 남시 송
Now in the Treasury of Abhidharma by the master Vasubandhu, in the root verses it says that mind, consciousness, and condition are the same meaning. So in general, in the exposition school, the Vaibhashika, and in the Sutra school, it is said that mind, consciousness, and cognition are all the same.
다 이기 넘버 10을야 차라 체네 베나 다 이기 넘버 10을야 저 차라로 이기 넘버 10 코란이나 차라 체체 에너지 넘버 10바 dumba 넘버 10 개바 사르 근데 차라게 체요만.
And then there is the sixth mental consciousness, which is talked about having that is not in that, it's not divided into the subtle and coarse aspects. So it is not divided into the subtle aspects of the seventh and eighth consciousnesses.
아주 티버 신비역이 내걸이야. 다 티버 신비역이 베나 넘리 마웨기. 티버 침모워체. number report samawe tipo chimbo che ene tisengi ji takala gar kai ko balane ente simi namshi sumlia yi number sibal ba chara yawa che anda simi namshi sumde be gasobe ko kar sunje ne ba semse du san kuishin namshi 이 세두스다네 뉴이 에너지 넘버 쉐바 세두스다나다 넘버 쉐바 세두스다나 넘버 쉐바 투 여러바 다들이 야와로 체체 단도나 가수에 드리직직 스미 넘시 숨데 다 넘버 2 넘버 쉐바 고란지 타라 야와로 체나입니다.
Then in the Mahayana scriptures, particularly in the scriptures of the Vijnanavadins, or the Vijnanavadan school, the Mahayana they interpreted the scriptures of the Mahayana and said that, well, when we look at the mind, there's mind, cognition, and consciousness. And they differentiated between the mind, cognition, and consciousness. And so when they said mind, what they meant by mind there was the ground consciousness. And when they said cognition, what they meant by that cognition was the afflicted mind, and by the afflicted cognition and consciousness. And by consciousness, what they meant by that were the six consciousnesses. And so in this way, they differentiated among them. There was the mind, cognition, and consciousness. And so this is basically dividing the sixth mental consciousness into a subtle and a coarse aspect.
지단도 군시 고란 넘버 10 책으로 봐. 넘버 10 이제 순거 봐. 다 임비네 지 스미 넘시 숨 송대하게 다 넘버 10 되 많이 송하로 다 되게 간다고지 지금 참여에 와천 나로 내용도 있어요.
Now, of course, the ground consciousness is a consciousness, but it's when we talk about differentiating between mind, cognition, and consciousness, then we're saying calling it mind, and not calling it consciousness. And so, in this way, it is a very subtle differentiation.
那这样说，他都是他就工业些吧，当，那就除非一些吧。 다 되게 되면 거 가서지 루고를 지다 남산남산 지게 남산남산 지게 메드라서 말বে 다 뒤서로 인민주산 템포요 말았어. 때 템포 메바 인주산에 지 파샤 고실리안 저 파샤 샤세게 가서 저 파샤 삭세게 줘는데 그 말았어. 안 다나시 진 녀무고 이대야 뉴이대야 안 다나시 뉴이 내가 뉴이 맵에 내가 붙는데 또 내가 숨송대도와 녀몽가 이 맵에 내가 숨송도와 근데 이제 사나 다 텔라서 그 녀몽바 대야지 가서야지 녀몽바 이 대야지 맵에 내가 그러지 용되도와 근데 이제 사나 다 이디게 상으로 yume ne ko mangbo chi yebe chenen tempo me yin zang ane bhasha goshi le te ko mares ta de kunshi sa de ta de number 7 nan ten shue ru cha de yebe yin zang ane ta de le yang ji yong ko cha ne be ngombo kundi lu ru che be yimina 바지 사 가자 심정 산에 지 상마게 이 봐도 어느 바지 지 군시디 규마체 버여 드리지 송능도와 딱 간다를 가인의 미니들이 지 고란 넘버 10 템포 주의 인상 안테 바자 고실 태그랬어
Now, when we look at the the 5 sensory consciousnesses and the 6th mental consciousness, these are fleeting and transient. So they occur, they arise, and then they stop. And so they aren't stable. And because they're stable, they're not really a consciousness where we can really collect the imprints. So it's not reasonable to say that they are consciousnesses that can collect the imprints because they're not stable. Similarly, when we think about the afflicted mind, the 7th consciousness, then there are some situations when the afflicted mind is not present. So, like, there are said to be 3 different situations or periods when there is no afflicted mind, and so for that reason, it's also said that that it can also not be a place that collects the imprints because of these periods when it is not present. But the ground, the alaya, is actually the most stable of all our consciousnesses. And so basically from the very beginning, it's always present. From the very beginning when we're sentient beings, all the way up until the time when up to the moment when we awaken to Buddhahood, then the ground consciousness is continually present. And so in this way it is stable. It is the most stable of the consciousnesses. So for this reason it is said to be reasonable to call it the ground of imprints.
भाषा घोषित से तो जाने ता लेंडे ता दिनजे के दिनजे ले गुंडे शेगरवा पहले क्या वांग सिर्फ शेय में कलिया अने ता जी क्या वांग आमेक भाषा देता चिमलिया जी ले संगे भाषा देता क्या वांग चिमल ड्रोग करवा ता ते ड्रोग तो जाने ता भाषा शास्त्र दी सिर्फ जो करवा ता ते सिद्धलिया अने को जो जुदा माउस से जी कार्य दुजुदिस मिलायो चा 뉴산 남직 마베 티버친 버스 안다 조지 군시리아 파샤샤 다디 군시티 안다지 겨와치만이야 조대아치마 안드린다 고 남실이야 고 겐다 테베잖아 양 군시기 띵 파자데야 세 안다데 지금 남이 지 디도 다음에 용대야 용대기 알았어 다들 숨기스
And so when we talk about this ground of imprints, then, in terms of karma, cause, and effect, or in terms of like our previous lives, in a previous life you have done something which places an imprint within ourselves, and then that goes to the next lifetime and it ripens as the external appearances of the world, the good or bad world. And so it goes to the next life. And so there needs to be some sort of a basis. There needs to be some sort of a ground for those imprints. Now, there are many different positions on this in the different philosophical schools, but according to the Vijnanavadins, then primarily it is the ground consciousness where the imprints are placed. And so, because it is the ground consciousness that continues from one life to the next, and then when the appropriate conditions come together, those imprints are awakened out of the ground consciousness, and they ripen upon us as experiences of pleasure or pain. And so for that reason, it's the ground of the imprints.
다지당기 남상게 왜 건다 주다마에 나눠려야 지 넘버 쉐바 직도 좀 직도 마와다 넘버 쉐바 도마르 마와 다 니온이 요체 넘버 쉐바 도마마에 나로리아 지 넘버 쉐바 지 초주도 마와다 지 dwindo 마와다 제도 마와다 구르 마와다 아들이 캬바 용디도와
Generally in the Buddhist philosophies, there are many different positions. There are people who say that there is just one consciousness. And then there are people who say that there are many consciousnesses. And among those who say that there are several consciousnesses, there are some who say that there are 6 consciousnesses. Some say that there are 7 consciousnesses, or 8 consciousnesses, or even 9 consciousnesses. So there are these different positions.
다디나는 겁들이야 소지 가르쳐 넘리마 우마 가르쳐 넘리마에 뒤받침 소리야 용자로 넘버십을 초게도 숨겨야래 다 넘버십을 초게 유주산에 다 레베지 셈 망부지 용데 야래데 디나네 셈 탐제로 아니 군실을 run고 많았어 군기실을 run고 많았어 대대 유산에 군시스도 산에 군기실이 교배 셈 개발하지 캐주 미세유에 대한 게 이제 셈 지겨워라.
And so, in general, among all of these, it is the Vijnanavadan school of the Mahayana that is known to say that there are 8 consciousnesses. And so, when we say that there are 8 consciousnesses, then generally, of course, there are many different types of mind that happen in this. There are all these different types of mind, and so not every instance of mind is going to be called the ground consciousness. But the ground consciousness is like the basis for all of the different instances of mind to appear, and so for that reason, it is particularly often called the mind.
이제 티도 나네 다 군시 캐주 망부송도와 다 디나네 다 개치슈지디 아니지 아주 안다 상마게 봐 소마르베 상마게 봐도 은심자 탐제 규리에 봐다 변에 군두 다양한데 티도 나네 대지지 개발을 도스 있으래 pero kundu nana chabi mina ana ji sa gebe chanju sa sa gebe o koliya anda di kunshi di ne gyur sa marwe da kunshi di gyurche yang ko ji naming namshe sa de ji ya ba gyurche ko gara sana ana ji dangzi gi sabe joba indu sa ne di gyurze de ne ko kunshi sa tanye mando cheche 에네고 내교네 남이 남시성도에 들을 지가 교도하러 직송도와 나디 가르사 티규나 말을 들을 수 있어요. 아니 그봐. 아니 군두 나눠려야 상마게 봐도 해버지. 다 드는 시에는 다 간다야. 고 가르쳐야지. 죽베 개발디 넘버 쉐바 그러지 넘버 쉐바 초보다 뒤버서 사 tinda mai bache je na ko temper ji yong de.
Now the ground consciousness is said to have many different features. For example, in the compendium of the yanas, there are many different features that are explained. Now, in terms of these, the most important of these, they're actually described a little bit differently in Asanga's text, the compendium of the vehicles and the compendium of the Abhidharma. And so, generally, in the compendium of the vehicles, it says that at the time that the Bodhisattva awakens to Buddhahood, at that point, the ground consciousness is transformed. And at that point, it is like it's the ripening of it. So basically, all of the seeds of clinging to a self have been overcome at that point. And so the ground consciousness is transformed. And when it's transformed, this is the ripening of it. And so this is how it's so it's talked about as the ripening consciousness. And this is how it is presented in the Compendium of the Vehicles. But in the Compendium of the Abhidharma, it's presented a little bit differently. And so it basically says that it is present until such time as you awaken to Buddhahood. And so there's a little bit of a difference in terms of how it engages as compared to other consciousnesses. For example, the sixth and the seventh consciousnesses are not stable. It is the eighth consciousness is the one that is always stably present.
나는 이제 상계에 살이야. 어느 군신남시리 이제 내 교류는 주산에 군시 멜론더비 이시리야 내 교야 지송료아래서 상계에 살.
And it is also said at the level of Buddhahood, the ground consciousness transforms. It is said that it transforms into the mirror-like wisdom.
디네 주산은 야가르기 하면 양다 뎀베. 아니 나버시바 초굴이야. 손에 안 타면 리아 가서 주마매베 남시사 드지 송도와 주마매베 남시 드리주산 상계 사이게 아니 멜론터비 시디 남시니 다 버나 디서지 맨로 단 드실 야맨로 버나지 상계 사이게 아니 멜론터비 이시디 다 세미레스 라고식으로다 지 넘버시바 임바체 다야 넘버시바 말에 송이 유기로 봐 다 송이 용되게 하래 넘버시바 임바체 넘버시바 레디 넘버시바 초게 뭐 가야 말아 봐 군신이 말에 유인의 말에 지 주보이 넘버시바 말에 공예요 시바도 좀 말에 되네 뉴스하나다 하고 남시 뉴스하나다 남시 신다 신 개보다 가야 뭐인도 안다지 넘버시바 구반도지 단 되고해서 단들이 공부하시면 딱 간다 근데 신인지 용되게 하래 다 간다냐 가수에 다 군시해야 돼. 다 베너지 셈 강가로 군시 뭐 임체. 군시해야 되고 계주 미세에 되베지 셈 탐지 자외 셈라고 지 자와라고 지. 아무나 좀 좋은라고. 아니 지 군시 심하라고 다 이제 군시지 어레스 송도 알았어. 다티 군시 저些게나 당기 등에 다 가서 가서 지그나 심잠버서는 다도 다 넘리 마베기 에너지 티버치 뭐도 주다 지수없지 대야지 넘리 마베 티버치 뭐도 줄라연 개버서 시주 망고 아래 다 임베는 지금 티듀가 남 조던들 지 송면 다 임비네야 야한테 야야 지 베나야 내주르제베 우마바 대주기 야지 타니가 남샤데 좀 마제 지 심sam보다 더블 송도와 대주사야 대주기지야 군시스도 산에 민지부 임비네야 아 되다 준비지 켜봐 용되는데 버지 용되게 하래 다나지 정중도지기 다숑 신다나로 변하지 사만난데 뒤주나로리야 에네 군시송야도 버지지 요새 디히닝 다 왜세베 이시 고라나야 군시대 군시 민기 때문에 근데 송도와 근데 뉴스다는 군시사야데 다 조데 당보지 군시사야데 고아라고 렌서도 다 조데 티버치비 내주르져봐 되서네 다 총매로 다 시대로 되래야 다 이미 야야래 뉴스다네 아니 군시사야데 민지고 이네 안 되는 개발시라 해야 돼. 내용도 있어.
Now there is an Indian scholar whose name in Tibetan is called Yandat Timpa, and he posited that at the time of Buddhahood that there's another consciousness that has it's called the stainless wisdom. And so at the level of Buddhahood, there is the mirror-like wisdom. But he explains that this mirror-like wisdom is a consciousness. And so generally when we think about the mirror-like wisdom of Buddhahood, it can be called, sometimes you say it's a mind or a consciousness. Some even say that it is not a consciousness. If it's consciousness, however, though, it cannot be one of the 8 consciousnesses. It's not the ground consciousness. It's not the afflicted consciousness. It's not the 6th mental consciousness. It's not the 5 sensory consciousnesses. And so if it's a consciousness, it has to be another consciousness than those 8. And so for that reason, they say that it is the 9th consciousness. And so there is that explanation of it. But in any case, when we talk about the ground consciousness, it means that when we talk about the ground consciousness, it means not every single consciousness or not every single moment. Basically, the ground consciousness means that it's like the foundation or the root of all of the mind things. It's like basically it's the ground where all of the different minds or consciousness can happen. And so that is what we mean by the ground consciousness. And then as we look at and so this is the explanation of the consciousness that comes up in the mind-only school or the Vijñāptavādan school. So this, and then there are also explanations of similar to this in some middle way texts. But primarily this is the explanation of the Vijñāptavādan or mind-only school. And this is primarily presented according to the compendium of the vehicles. Now, when we get to higher philosophical schools, such as the Yogacarya middle way schools, then they also, when they talk about how the conventional appearances occur, then they primarily talk about this in a way that fits with the mind-only presentation. And so in describing this, they do use the word, the ground consciousness, but there is a difference in the meaning that they present. Similarly, when we look at the texts of the 3rd Karmapa Rangjun Dorje, he mentions the ground consciousness in his profound inner meaning. But when he mentions it there, what he means is the Buddha nature, or the luminous wisdom that is present. And so it's given the name of the ground, or the alaya. But even though it is given the name, it is actually a different meaning. So basically, when we understand it, in terms of the Mahayana presentations, primarily it comes from the Vijñāptavādan mind-only tradition. But then, as we come up to other philosophical schools, often it's using the same name for it, but the meaning is very different.
단도나 아주지 셈 벤다 시리기 차디 ene baji kashoy peraji nyui de cha cha yina an ko ji quran ji se shi ribe cha zam shi da yang ko nyomo ba de jebe cha she ji ta ni yong de yor ba de du sa ne ane ji nyomo ba de jebe ji bang che cha de ba bang yong du sa ne ta ji dang serik zam sa de ya ji se shi ribe sa de 지당 아주 루릭 나나 셰대야 그 세시게 보점 세대야대다 양지 야야디지 고아 띵섭도 누구사는 지 시리스야대야 주니 디신이 지 가셔요 왜세요 왜세 디신이 들려야 고야지 세와서 들리질 고야지 용디 유스네 다 강다야 아니 가셔야다 방제 차디바 다 드르지 고아르지 레아메로 지잖아 이 시사시 리베 차들이 고 견스케 매체 담 다나신야 초진의 셰비네 고 타베 차지다 마다베 차지 이 용디가 얼마 다 마다베 차데 바 방용주사네 타베 차도 응원도 규르용주사네 에네다 지기 가지고 남시 이시스네 주사로 또 드르지 용디가 많죠 드르주사네 다베 뉴이 저지리 미냐 그런 세시 리베 차지 용디가래 타베 차지 용디가래 다 된제 지 세리게 차디 지 심제네 저 상게 봐도 로레 메로 드리 주산에 다 된제 지 세리게 차디 뭐 바지 가쇼에 다 세릭 차선에 다도 답에 차대 다 리베 지금 tima 정림기 뭐 tima 섭섭도 누르사네 얘네 그 지금 답에 차대 주는 아다 문도 교용해야 합시다. 또 차대 이거 봐. 드린 주사네 얘네 지 남시대 이시사들네 다들 지금 다 된다도는 아주 지금 남도 추구사로 지금 뒤에 차게 전부 이제 아주 그 유 나로려야지 남도 추구 즉 송도와 그렇게도 그도로야 봐 남도 추구를 했을 때도 사네 아니 지금 괜찮으지 남도 추구를 했을 때도 사네 아니 바지지 남도 아주 남도 더라 추구를 연구했는데 안다 바지지 상계 와서 개민도 소설을 이제 연구도 와 다 이미 남도 추구를 했을 때도 사야 남도 추구 다지 뭐 예면서는 다도 단 도나지 셈지려야 뭐 답에 차지다 마답에 차지 다디고 오지 예면을 차려요 아래 린주산에 뭐 타디에도 파지 시에도 약간 가버지 차리고 타디에서 뭐 제 타디에라지 말아 봐 다 린주산 땅뭐 예면 인주산에 안다지고 마답에 차도 방인주산 답에 차는 거는 교가 다 대안지 대 문도 교와 좀 레마도베 지금 아주 답에 차 지금 마답에 차 제타되는 거지 니 그렇지 마답에 차지 제타되지 파빵 아니 답에 차 제타되 버지 주송의 소리들이 있어만 대인주산에 단도나 다 지단다 아주 군시들이야 파사 나서지 용디가 뭐 니말을 하신도 다 파사 먹고 싶어요 있어요 게임이 롱화된 파사 다 동창모 얘기래 다 파사 탐제 아주 장도 말을 하신도 왜 쓴거 말해 다 이면에 조조 베는 뉴이 세윤주산에 뉴이리아 조조 세바당 다와당 다 아게다 뭐봐 송도와 다 용모바 시다 제바 임비치는 다 뉴이 송도와 다 디나는 자외 용모바데 파지다 다와디 임바다 다도 다와디 근데 다도 다와디 지 방투 이미나 하고 바자 신다 저 리시도 방 먹어치 자외 용모 먹고 다도 다와디 지 방용주산에 지 등진이야 지 님보된 용주산에 얘네 신다고 배지 가서다 용모바지 신다다 다는 지 바자 신다데 상로지 자외 용모바도 방용주산에 얘네 지 가서에 자와 도리 용주산에 제모 매번은 시 아이 야가티소 직도하는 시 다 드리지 바지 용되게 있어요 드리주산 뒤준센데네 남바상게베 지 당매래 초동 안에 등지래야 녀버대야데 계속 이유다 가라선다 아주지 게미기 맞아 나서지 아래 아주 디보미게래 나서지 아래 레신도 배 장고는데 탐에 버려 주죠 봐 코아 통만 매버는 아주 내게 가르사요 하고 다 될래 이제 가서 이제 조조다 간다라 등진 당다로 들려야 토요일 인주상 한지 들려야지 이게 뭐 대화도 계속 있어
Basically, in our mind, there is like the clear awareness. There's the aspect of clear awareness, the part of clear awareness. Even when we talk about the presentation of the seventh afflicted mind, then that also has the aspect of clear awareness. It's like it has two parts. There's the clear awareness part, and then there's the part that is mixed with the affliction. So there are these two parts, and they're like they're inseparable in a way. And so, like, when you eliminate the part that is mixed with the afflictions, then just the mere clear awareness remains. And so we gradually go through and we gradually purify them, and then we just have the afflictions, and then we just have the clear awareness. And so generally, when we talk about the clear awareness, then there are ways that there's mentioned, it's described in the texts on the different classifications of mind. Then there are also ways that is described where it's said that clear awareness is like the wisdom of the Dharmata, the luminous wisdom of suchness, and so forth. But in any case, when we think about it, it's like there are two parts. There's the part that we need to eliminate, and the part and the clear wisdom part. And so these parts, you can think about the part that we need to eliminate and the part that does the eliminating, or you can think about them as the pure and the impure parts. And so the impure part is what we need to eliminate, and when that is eliminated, then the pure part becomes manifest. And so in this way we have consciousness and wisdom. So the seventh afflicted mind has this clear knowing part. This is the pure part of it. And so when we, and this is present within all of us from the time that we're ordinary sentient beings up until Buddhahood. And so there is this aspect of the clear awareness. This is the clear aspect. And then gradually, as we go through the progression of removing and cleansing all of the signs, then that pure aspect of our minds becomes gradually revealed and gradually pure. And so that is the meaning of when we talk about thoughts or consciousness and wisdom. It's like in Mahamudra we say that thought's Dharmakaya. We say thought is Dharmakaya, but if we think about it right off, directly like that, it's kind of strange to say that a thought is Dharmakaya. Because if we say thoughts are Dharmakaya and we say, oh, we have thoughts, then it's like there's almost no need for us to awaken to Buddhahood. So when we talk about the thoughts as Dharmakaya, then what we're really saying is that the essence of these two is indivisible. And so in one mind or one cognition, there are like two aspects. There's the pure aspect and there is the impure aspect. The essence of these two cannot be separated. So it's not like there's some different substance. There's not different substance of the two. It's not like you get rid of the impure substance and then you have to get the pure substance. Rather, as you eliminate the impure, then the pure is naturally relieved. It's not like you have to destroy the impure in any way. And so, if the so it's not so when you have the pure and the impure, they're not separate substances where we have to eliminate the pure and then we get the pure substance in. It's not where we have to eliminate the impure and then we get the pure substances. And so we have in our ground consciousness, we have all the imprints, and every day we collect many imprints. It's like we get thousands of imprints every day, virtuous imprints, unvirtuous imprints. And we think to ourselves, if we think to ourselves, oh, we have to get rid of all of these imprints, then we actually couldn't do that because we can't even identify most of the imprints that we have within ourselves. But when we think about the seventh afflicted mind, then it actually has four different afflictions that are part of it. It has the craving, the view, the pride, and the ignorance. Craving, view, pride, and ignorance. It has all four of these afflictions. And so this is like the root of the afflicted mind. And the root of all the afflictions in the afflicted mind is the view. When we say view, we mean the view of a self. And so if we can eliminate that view of a self, then there's no need for us to eliminate the other imprints within ourselves because we've eliminated the root of all of them. So it's like the antidote for our clinging to a self is also the antidote for all of the other things. And so there are all the afflictions that we have and all the other imprints that we have within ourselves. But if we can eliminate the root or the foundation, then like if you cut down a tree from the stump, then the branches also are naturally cut down as well. And so for that reason, we in the Buddhist presentation, we say that we can use the antidotes for that help us to uproot our we make use of the antidotes to uproot our ego clinging, and that way we can eliminate all of our misdeeds and unvirtues and so forth. And so this is why we consider, in the Buddhist view, the antidotes for the clinging to a self to be most important. And so in this way, if we think about it, we have so many imprints within ourselves of virtuous acts and unvirtuous acts that if we had to go through and purify each and every one of those imprints, there'd be no way we could do it, because we have been collecting those imprints since beginningless sorrow. And so for that reason, we work at uprooting or eliminating our clinging to a self, because that is the root of all of it. And so in this way, looking at the antidotes for clinging to a self is important.
파살 된 나는 그래서 다 이미네 치료 된도 주변 다 겐직당 에너지 남기게 이거래야 되어 그래서 다배 선자마로 디즈이비나 아니 파지 파자 셋업 코너를 되네 안다 가다지 난 그래서 다들 숨면 드레이 뉴스안에 안다 상으로 지 게임이 파자를 되네 고 가서야다 나와나서 차대야지 배나 딴 데르지비나 배나 배나 매동원부를 지기 위해서 다 매동원부 다 아주 지금 투몽기 지 레난가 주에서 말해 매동원부를 지기 위해서 다 투몽 레난 주서 말해 다 들리지 공부 지기 위해서 다 들려야 안 미주기 안 따용 거리야 라소스기 이제 파샤 왕기 땀 원보지 다보다보지 강가로 나한테 요하데 임비네야 따데지 원보디 지 카도다 아니 입당 다나신 따디 지 이도 용미용라서 아 되게 되지 미주부들이야 지 투몽 모임베 능주래 좀 능거 봐 마도베 아니 미주부디게 가수에 라소스리야 지 난데버디 성로지 차용조네 피버지 능거 하면서 드네 유사는 저 라수소리야 투모모인베 가수다 일단 매동원비 능거 알았어 드네 유산다디 조조 저 소소의 파자를 된다 지 파자 다 게임이게 다 파자서 말다 드네리아 된세 고 나서스 난데 지 원딩도 드린도 디준세야 되네 아니다 아주 지 두균기 미진나로를 이미네야 그래서 이제 게임이지 파샤 시스템으로 이제 심규리야 지 파샤 상부 좋아 근데 개와 주세야 돼다 조지 개회 파샤 좋아 심규리야 지 가서 곰지체네 지 심규리야 지 템보 체제 내야 지가 매주자 지 최양의 체사 들주지도 드네 뉴스안에 딱 기시 지 첸들이야 아니 배나 칼라로 지미지 지 미신달이야 지 세신 부대 다나신 아니 그래상보요 들이 채비네 안지 겨워지 말이야 디 바자 가르스 바자 텔레데네 에너지 소술리네 지 세신보사 용화 그 전부 공안 용화 아들이 지 바자로 좀 어디 있어요 안 다나신 단 도나 지 바자 써야 되지 가수하다 단도는 지 소수기 셈기 심규기 따고 찬항으로 지려도 와 근데 뒤산에 땅우마 얘들이 지해요 배나 미 배나 강사 뜻이도 지리야 아니 지금 토나 지 미소수기 지 토나 배나 미니 대비나 배나 나당 다나지 대면 미니기 대비이나 고지 가수에 지당고 강사 뜻이 지리네야 미소수 나올을 배나 나라 나외 뜻이 도지 시가 미다로 지다 안 다나지 강사 신다 나외 뜻이 돼야 시가 미다로 지 니 나용도 드린 오이 니스 탈이야 강사 뜻이 니 근데 민자 니다 용신 말아 봐. 다 임비네 다 소소소래야지 파자고 왕다 소소소 근데 나윤 주산에 다디 조지 소소기 엔디 다디 셈기 능수를 주제로 와. 근데 주산에 다 오늘 저 치료 전도배 가르쳐지 그게 소소지 셈레베지 셈기 나자레베 로스 치 아주 파삼던 주산에 아주 지뢰 아주 파삼 담마다나야 지 유기원에 지 도도로 집에 지 두두에 성사로 되지 나와로 샤용 거 봐. 다 이미네야 전당원에야 근데 지금 아주 지 임바다 마임이 좀 정도 망보를 치는 지 셈기 파샤가 차나 다나 신지 지 셈기다 정도 나조식 체인도 산에 텔레데네 엔다고 지 맞을이야 강에 마음으로 체리야 다 정도 봐 이 주산에 다 뒤준전되네 다 조조 지 주다 오만이 야 고만이 야 일변 조연 주산에 칸낭도 거 삼다 지 가서 버지 띵서도 서도 저거 있어요 되는 주산다 또는 조디 에너지 단데 남샤만 못 쳐야 돼 남시고 남샤만 못 쳐야 돼 조조 칸낭도 거네 삼다 주산에 뭐지 띵서도抓也对不对？你就是呢，但第一就是的呢，我那不想往不地方的就是。
So in the exposition school and the sutra schools, they say that there are external objects, and they say that these are like the objective condition, the condition that has to be there. For example, in the sutra school, they do, of course, say that they're the aspects, the images that occur because of the imprints arising in our mind. But they say that these can only happen if there's also the external condition of the object. They say that there has to be both the external object and the internal condition for the appearance to happen. But in the mind-only tradition, it said that it's just merely the awakening of the imprints, that itself, that based on that alone, there are the appearances. But basically, we have all the imprints within ourselves, all the virtuous and unvirtuous imprints, and it's because of these that there are all the different appearances that happen. For example, if we have like a single blue flower, whether we say it's, like the flower that arises out of our common perceptions because of common karma, but basically we have a single blue flower here. And if 10 different people are looking at this single blue flower, then we all see it in slightly different ways because we have different imprints. So it appears we have different perceptions of it. The blue, the color blue, the shape of it, whether it's attractive or not attractive. We have our own particular ways that it appears to us. And so it's just these own individual appearances, and it's not like there's some complete total appearance that it has. Rather, it's just our own individual perceptions. And so that's how the blue flower sort of appears to us. Basically, it's primarily happening because of the imprints we have within ourselves. So it's because of the virtuous and unvirtuous imprints we have that all the appearances occur. And so for that reason, when we live our lives, we talk about virtuous and unvirtuous imprints. If we think about in our mind, when we have the virtuous things in the continuum of our mind, like we need to make good virtuous imprints. So we do something virtuous, and that makes an imprint, and we get habituated to that. And as we get habituated, then that make those habits stable in ourselves. That is what we try to do through our Dharma practice. For example, in this life, like we might have food and something, and if we, in this life, we practice by giving the food to others or give clothing to others, then that makes a good, strong imprint in our mind, a good imprint. so that in the next life we will also be able to have good food and warm clothing and so forth. So we have these imprints, and when we say imprints, it's like these are like a part of our own mind stream. Like I've thought about it in this way in the past. Like if, for example, if you have this one individual, Mr. Tashi, so you've got your individual Mr. Tashi, and if you've got two different people who are seeing this individual Mr. Tashi, it's not like they're both seeing him in the same way. It's like I'm seeing Mr. Tashi in my own way, and the other person has got their own particular perception of the individual Mr. Tashi. We see them in different ways. We think of them, it's like we're seeing a different person. So in actuality, there are not two separate different Mr. Tashis there. Rather, it's just the appearance that occurs because of the ripening of our own, because of our own imprints. And so, primarily, when we have perceptions, the way we perceive things in our mind, it seems as if there's something outside of our mind, something that is separate from our mind in any way, something that does not depend upon our mind, as if there is some actual solid object that is proven and truly existent out there. But when we look at how it actually is, then we have a lot of different, when we think about how it actually is, we have different misconceptions about what it's like or what it isn't like. These are just appearances that happen because of the imprints in our mind, but we exaggerate them or we deny them. We have different ideas about them, and because of having misconceptions of them, we experience many difficulties in our life. And so, the main way to think about this is that in the different philosophical schools, you've got the progression from the lower schools to the higher schools. And it's as if in this progression that each school is looking progressively deeper and deeper within themselves and seeing it more in a more and more profound way. And so that's why there are so many different presentations and so many different descriptions of the consciousnesses. It's as they look inside and turn inside themselves and look, they have gained deeper and deeper understandings, more and more profound understandings of how our minds are.
다들 인주산에 지 남상계의 philosophy 상만에 지 친이지베기 네 지 슝로게 떠주고 남샤를 상로 다 저거디 다 주주바냠래 대양 저지 심균뒤터 다 들려야 미제 다 미유로 진제지 인베 토한다 도마치 덴주에 캠베 지 덴주 정법을 쓰이냐 지 주다 수행자법도 덴주 정법을 쓰이냐 근데 지금 미유치 손지 배워라 말아줘도 지 주다당 어느 지 대다가 지 덴주에야 로종 세베 걸이 이미냐 대다 대신 다지 주변냠내 그 초수라로 지다 지 심규디베 특수라로 지 개심시라입니다 단 너는 지 칸한도 거시 지다 랑기 지 춘이기 띵 삽살이야 바지 삼당토야로시 근데 중부이미네 아니 신의 지 남바 상계베 지 떠주 이 공대 리고지 녀베임을 지 문제 제셔버지 제마다 아직 떠주세요. 직시에 인도산 같이 떠주 차인도산 강갈로베 가서에 지 아주에다 지 치료 카 수수 삼로데베 치료래베 가서에 리포트 치료래베 당한체 안다지 지 군시지 요하래다 요하마네 근데 안다나시 제 다나지지 최탐제 다디 베네지 sem이 나와서 들을 순거 봐. 다 sem이 나와 사데 엔다가들 가셔야다지 나지 이치아가라 하고도지 최다 탐지 생각 나와 인기 말해서 다 들려고 저 도바데 좀 먹고 싶이 요한지도 와. 다 초진데 도바데 좀도 요한 셔버래. 더 정도 쉬어가 버려야 다 인비네야. 근데 지 도바데 좀 망부지 사고야. 좀 전소디 아주 저 칸나도 막을 때네다 도바티즘 고메가 도바티즘 막으로서 영어되게 만들어서 들으시는 간다야 저 군시 사지 유에 다지 최탐지生个那一不里啊，说是年限定出过就中年嘛中年，但这里就写过个中山的挂头的或者是啦，做的就看难的过呢，啊就三路当起开始，看难的过呢，三当过的开始没不记，传统有的什么。本来他地上怎么的道理啊？本来他年尾家里面呢，本来家边呢上就，大那些对这个干啥的，老汉的是，给多少钱开，啊这个迷茫不了，甚至忙不完的要的，俺大那些就当怎么的地上对嘴里啊，没上我的就去我不了，同样钱差不多啥呢？提军事的点呢的，就边角给人归当。他那些说的，本来就冲击，这特贵了，全部冲别个了，没上了一切，就一趟钱多少，热瓦塞了，这你是忙不用的啊的，那真这个那个了，就这第一的，希望不看到了呀，然后绿的别说没吧。他第一啥的是能生的就，缺德别不去当，能生个道理啊，大看的，第几就主要吧，他那就讲这就，什么是当官的，开始其他的什么的，就新闻不的就，好了的，就就二把啥的什么了，到点不要嘛的，我参照就促进交流用过的。参照嘛，那就微信碰吧，那到自己看现那个微信碰呗，碰吧的这样的，还是强度的那就是啥呢？但是这么也不就能什么呀？就什么去什么当官的，开始其他的下什么的成员，那这里就是啥呢？这上面，那这里什么这个，搞了的做就什么呀？搞不下。他们这里啊，就是的中级小门吧，中级县那么看起，他们这里啊呢，中级学，我们学下来也不意思。
When we think about Buddhist philosophy or the proving and the proofs and proving the Buddhist views or the presentations of the path of characteristics or all the presentations, then basically the main thing is that they have to be associated with our practice, that they have to become ways to help us tame our beings and tame our minds. This is the aim of all of the philosophy. This is what the aim that all of the authors of the treatises had when they had it. So when we study treatises or when we study philosophical schools, this needs to be our aim as well. So we need to be able to link it with our own practice and combine it with our own practice and use it as a way to tame the streams of our own minds and our own beings. The important thing is that we need to turn our attention inwards and look inwards. We need to look at the nature of our own selves, the nature of our own beings, and bring it into that practice. And if we do that, then that is the point from which it begins to be really the establishing the view of Buddhism, practicing the Buddhist philosophy. That is the intent of the Buddhist philosophy. Otherwise, if we think that philosophy is something where we're looking outside ourselves and we're thinking that it's something where we're directed in an outer direction, we're saying, oh, this exists, this does not exist, then it gets very difficult. It's like if we say to ourselves, oh, all phenomena are just perceptions of our mind, they're appearances to our mind. This is something that's difficult for us to understand. It's hard to understand that things are to have. To realize that things are understood. And of course, when this happens, then it's not a situation of any blame, but maybe it's a question that we just haven't really turned around and looked inside ourselves. And because we have not looked deeply or profoundly within ourselves, we come up with all of these unnecessary doubts and unnecessary thoughts and suspicions, like, Like whether there is a ground consciousness or not, and we think about having to develop certainty in the idea that all appearances are mind. What's the reason for doing it? The real reason for doing it is that we need to actually turn our attention inwards and think about what our own actual mind is like. That is what is important to do. Like in recent days, there has been the earthquake in Japan. There's have been the explosions at the nuclear reactors, and many people have many different thoughts and many different things they think about it. But the main thing here is that everyone, it's like we're all putting a lot of interest and attention on external things, and and so when we think about things, we think about the decrease in the economy or the weakening economy. We think about the decline of business and so forth. It's like we don't know where to place our hopes. It's hard for us to believe what is happening. And so what's important at a time like this is that we need to know where to look for happiness. And happiness is not something that should depend upon external things. Really, we need to find a way to really bring happiness into our internal mind, to make ourselves happy internally. And so I think it is important to think about how to find happiness within ourselves. Because if our happiness is something that depends upon external things, then that happiness is not anything that can be happy, that can be stable in any way. Things change all the time. Things fall apart. And there are stories of people who even may be rich, but then become a beggar and become or become very poor in an instant. And so we cannot let our happiness depend on that. Rather, it is important that we look within our own minds to find the happiness within ourselves. And so I would like to encourage you all to please think of all the advice and all the teachings that Rinpoche has given you, and keep them all consider them all very important. And so to close this evening, I'd like to tell a story. And so then after I tell the story, then I will take my leave.
다들 제가 중국 소리다 된된지 중루 시대요 만에. 대량의 엄마 더 지금 시대다. 남시의 이시스도 왔어. 다 남시스도 사네. 아니 가르쳐래. 이시스도 가르쳐랬어. 남 이시스도 사는 배 예시스 벽에 난다 예시에서 예 연대만에 거라고 우유니주 가리면데 딱 뭐고 탐지게 주니 연대만이 우유니주 가리면 어떤지 담변이 우유니주 가리면데 연대만이 우유니주 가리면데 뭐마디 아니 시합에 인사 아니 이시스 남시스도 사는 우유니주 원에 전에고 마셔체 다 되게 루브루에 튜나 튜나 줌바 남규르잠 이제 주변 남규르잠 다시 시합들이야 남시스 그래서 다 들이야 아니 배송으로 샤위나 들이야 엄마지 시합다 마지 그냥 마지 근육이래 상계 좀 된데 그거 로주지 아니 상계 님들이야 치료래야 수년 페어스 수년 페네 아니 미잔지 오늘 페어스 대네 이 김다디 아니 상계도 스페이드스타는 고 김다디 지데스 자성본으로 좋네 다 기랑조디 이 라도 중어데서 아니 민사메 고여제 동네 아니 돌 나조로 자스 무슨 아니 배 돌롱가 요한데 아무도 기랑조 대네 기랑조 아니 배 또 하나만 세비체 나조로 배 자스 무슨 기랑조디 미르바스 대네 기랑조 톱지 기랑조 마세체 아니 밀리아 미자베 뇨르긴 가시 자스 뭐배그 뇨르만 보시 아그 망보시에니 이나 상계기 아니 들이야 렌자는 껴요 말았어 담아도 두산 딱고 렌장게 메두산은 거에 지존데 저로 가마중 그 계좌디 되는 채소 안 그렇게 정말 딱고 계좌 채서 두산은 상계 저랑 게당 알아가도 상을 납자서 나게 안 납상만 납자서 당기 되네 상기 다 당기 계랑 알아야지 망보디 가 측중부 망보지 숭숭 다 대소 안 뭐래 제 포함 깨지지 다 계신 케게 미지라 잘라 제베이나 잘라 자지 디 미지 레마소나 계랑 가르쳐 얘네다가 나랑 그 주다 보지 아마도 답시 엄마로 다나신 계랑 그 당기 아저지 측주부 망보지 안에야 시에송 근데 대중 알 먹어서 계랑 다 보지 않는 거지 아들에서 다들 남시대 이시 개발돼 다 바지 룸텔에 되나 바체샤나 아 예사다디 게말라야르다디 다 남시 이시 개발 가르서나 다 나존저지나 다 진짜 니주지 채비나 다 미지시엔 남산다 콘로치그로 콘로치 들레네 가그로 바다 다 잡아러 와서 잡아지 뭐마 디가리야 수념량 가도 고라티 룩스여네 지르 바데 내가 잡아지 룩스여 제데 교회에 드네시야데 강민제인 봐 다베 주고제로다 다들 주고제 가자르서나 다 그디 지 남주르점 뭐에 니주디 들려야 그 가르쳐다 다들이 디 내가 디기 아니 니주 가르쳐 루브르베 니주 될 때네 디 고고를 추네 근데 다 다라는 야지 렌접 제샤 대가라는 야 콘도 제샤로 맞아 왜 니주 돌아야 콘도 제거하면 맞아 그 나를 주도 보잖아 이제 그 눈주체는 애 눈주체가 와서 개민도 와야 돼 와. 다 이내디 코지 눈주체 제연사 디쇼라 소소 눈주체샤. 아데 가라서나 남시스 드리지입니다. 지 남바지 파데 되나지 뭐지 컨트롤 나나 삼삼을 소셔 그러다. 그지 주지 녀바메바야 녀바조 지 가르쳐야 다 컨트롤 많아 까메바도지 소셔 그러봐. 다들 까메바 소셔 그래서 갑자기 루브르웨 다 깬드네 좀 좀연도 사네 다디 남주르 디 왕도 치네 나 콘사리고 얘네 상계기 나 콘사야 말 나고 녀모버 가르쳐 코라 얘네 가르쳐다 녀모베 시왕도 손에 근데 지 근데 지금 눈주셔비네 얘 눈주셔가 왔으면도 근데 인도사네 저랑 눈주셔도 저랑 다 보죠 나한테 먹었어 저랑 눈주셔는 얘 키고야 가는도 다 내송으로 와. 근데 무사네. 다리 rumbuji 군들이 그냥 삼베지 남시대 이신 제베 때 당화 망고 쉬그래. 이런 두사네. 에 기랑소에 망고바는 뒤소지 구유서. 봐. 미즈 주지 가르쳐야지. 콘트로사 키베 터시 만다 착보 체용도 아니 소소이 디 고고알 마테베체. 소소 가르임바디 랑신 가리임 받들이야 내 도지당 랑수 마셔 가져와디 계속 있어요. 다 진짜 뭐죠나 야 삼삼 괜찮아 참래. 근데 미가시 오늘처럼 우마사데 가르지래 따와 우마 여러분 동이 당매 사데 오늘처럼 시스템을 폐하고 쳐지려 봐. 다 이미 미가시 우마 장장장장 타마를 좀 아제 쳐르지. 등진 쳐르지. 다 되네 참라데. 다나 집에 구신 냄새 시야가 돼. 다 저디 렌제 취미서. 제 내 상행이 되고서야 취미서. 다 겨와는 겨와데 가르쳐지. 지 겨와는 겨와야 고 가르쳐지. 초라면으로 제시고 다 내용하여 지 딘중 내준제 그 딘중 가르쳐야다. 감에도 샤요. 다 내용도 산다고 근데 भाषा 고시를 찍고 두산 렌제 취미서 찍고 두산 안다고 렌제 भाषा 고시를 찍고 그러 아들이 두산에서 시에가 연전에做的 렌제 취미서 와 시에고 두산에 다 디체도도 와. 다 이면에 양 가세지고 군시 시비시야 연계 저 리베 둑둑둑둑둑둑 담아들이야 다 군시 개발사야 개발 명의로 토마도 현재 코란의 렌제 취미서에게 지금 딩으로 지금 이세로 게임이야. 근데 차이나 남아상기에 떠들잖아요. gwabashira chungyo ma. Tene Hindustane macho je namba sangi be tenju tamje la dubal hulle be tenju siga re. Zo de simgyun dutab 저기 남진 공마 주네 지 시원 양에는 되면 공마 주야 근데 지기 채도 미고 마도 요 말스 텐주 탐지 드리긴 가래 순거 이 주산에 뒤준데 되는 사람들이 투삼시하고도 도저 남아 보시나 쉬는 갈라 사례 샤토지
So this is the story, and this is not something that's coming from some other text. It's not like, but in terms of the distinction between, it's not some philosophy or something. But when we talk about the idea of consciousness and wisdom, well, what is it that we mean when we say consciousness? What is it that we mean when we say wisdom? When you talk about wisdom in Tibetan, what we say is yeshe, which means like knowing the primordially. It's like knowing what's always primordially been there, the nature of all things that's primordially from the very beginning been present, knowing how things have been from the very beginning. And so when we know actually how things have been from the very beginning, that is knowing the primordial. So it's the wisdom, the primordial, pristine wisdom. But consciousness, or namshe, knowing the aspects of things, it's like there are all of these transient, confused appearances that appear, these fictitious appearances that happen. And so it's like there's this expression of these different aspects of experience. And so it's like knowing the aspects, or namshe, or consciousness. And so, like for an example of this, I've said this example a few times, and so I think a lot of you have already heard this, but at any rate, during the time of the Buddha, the Bhagavan Buddha, one day was going on his alms round. And as he went on the alms round, he came to a particular house. And when he got to this house on the alms round, he knocked at the door, and the owner of the house, the master of the household, came out, and he got really annoyed. He got really angry. What is it that you monks are always coming around? You monastics are always coming around, knocking on the doors. You're making such problems, asking for food, begging for food. You're not doing anything to get your own food, and you're always coming, making problems, and making a nuisance of yourself. So why isn't that you just go out and do all this? And so he said many things like this, spoke like for a long time, talked about how problematic and difficult it was. And the Buddha just sat there and he listened. He didn't respond at all. He didn't say anything. And so this other, the householder, when the Buddha just sat there, then eventually, because the Buddha wasn't responding in any way, he just eventually stopped talking. And when he finally stopped talking, then the Buddha said to him, "Have you finished? Are you done?" And the householder said, "Yeah, I guess I'm done." And so then the Buddha said, "Okay, so you've said all these angry and harsh words. So now I've got a question to ask you. If you were to give something that's really valuable, you're to give this really valuable thing to someone, and then they said, 'I don't want it, I'm not going to take it,' what would you do with it?" And the householder said, "Well, I guess I'd have to take it back and keep it for myself. There'd be nothing else to do." "Oh, that's good. Well, you've said all these mean things and all these harsh words to me, so I don't need them, so why don't you take them back and keep them for yourself?" And so this is like the difference between consciousness and wisdom. And we can sort of see the difference between consciousness and wisdom from this story. So when we talk about consciousness, and the way things appear to us, then it's like, there's something that they're getting angry, and then we feel like we have to respond. And so, you might think to yourself, "Okay, I'm a monk or I'm a nun, I have to go out. This is the tradition. I'm supposed to go on all alms rounds. Why aren't you giving me alms? This is what's supposed to happen. It's like the tradition." And so this is looking at the outer aspect of how things are, the outer appearances of how they are. It's not looking at the inner nature of how things are. It's really looking at how they appear. We're fooled by how things appear on the outside, and for that reason we feel like we need to respond, and we feel like that we need to get angry. in return. But actually, there's no need for us to get angry. He's getting angry, he's making a mistake, but just because he's made a mistake doesn't mean that we have to make a mistake. And so it's like he's made a mistake, and if on top of that, then we also make the mistake, that's like the consciousness. That is getting, thinking about the external appearance of things, and then we get angry. And so, so he does something wrong, and then in addition to that, we get angry. But actually, these are all just transient conditions and circumstances that happens. And then because of those, we see the expression of those or the aspects of those, and then we get angry. But the Buddha does not get angry. The other person may be under the power of all the afflictions, but there's no need for the Buddha to respond to that. He's given them all up. And so he can say, you can take back your nasty words. I don't need them myself. And so now you all have been here, you've been listening to Rinpoche's teachings on distinguishing consciousness and wisdom, and so you need to remember how this is something that's necessary for you. And so in situations when all the things are like leading you to get angry, you need to really look at this and really look at the nature of what they're like and see how they are and not let yourself be overcome by the anger. And so if not, what is the point of doing this? When we talk about the people who practice middle way philosophy and talk about egolessness and selflessness, this is something that's supposed to help us in our minds. But some people, when they study the middle way philosophy, they get even more and more proud. Their ego clingings grow stronger and stronger. And like when we talk about the ground consciousness, this is something, the reason why the ground consciousness is taught is because it's taught as a way to show how it is that karma, cause and effect does not dissipate over time, that it is not wasted over the time. Instead, it is something that goes with us from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And so it's showing, it's a way of teaching how it is that all of the causes and conditions that lead to the interdependent arising of karma and cause, there is a basis where all of these imprints are stored within us. There's a place to put it. And that is why the ground consciousness is taught. It's taught in order to help show us why it is that karma, cause and effect are not wasted and do not just dissipate on their own. So that is why we need to say that there is the ground consciousness. That's why we try to establish the ground consciousness. But sometimes we think about it, oh, this is the ground consciousness, and we describe it and try to prove it, and then you become very skilled in saying the words ground consciousness. But actually, you can think of that if you don't end up with any confidence or with any reason to believe in the karma, cause and effect, then all of that philosophy is useless. It has no help for you. And so you have to remember that all the philosophy, all of the treatises that are written are taught as a way for us to tame our own minds, to tame the continuums of our own mind. And that is why they are taught. And they're taught so that we can achieve the peace of nirvana. There's no other reason for them to be taught. And so this is the reason why they're taught, and this is why we need to study and contemplate them. And so that is now enough. It is now dinner time, and so I'd like to thank you all very much.